our July meeting. And I wanted to say that the reason we are is because our regular TAM meeting, which is July 25th, we're going to meet in the afternoon from 2 to 5, and the board members are going to interview the candidates that are passed on from your search committee and your tech committee. I'm assuming it will, is it gonna be in the Civic Center or here?
Probably at the Civic Center. We'll confirm that
We'll
in
confirm
our normal
it.
meeting space there.
So put down 2 to 5, January 25th. Happy to welcome some new members here. Do we have a member that we're gonna swear in, or do we wanna do it?
Welcome to Mr. Beckman from Cornadera. We'll be swearing you in as soon as we find the form.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
And are you a new member?
I'm sworn.
Oh, you're sworn, okay,
Yeah,
Renee from
Renee's-
Fairfax.
Renee's good.
All right. Executive Director's Report, let's
Yes,
just
thank
go to
you.
that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope your summer's going well so far. You have a short Executive Director's Report in your packet. A couple of additional items, which you didn't have, is the SMART report coming to us from Farhad, so you can glance over that. And then we just got an advisory from Caltrans on overnight ramp closures associated with our ramp metering project. So this is Drake. This has gone out through a very large email distribution list, as well as to managers and public works directors and folks at the clerks at our local jurisdictions. And it's just a schedule of upcoming activity. So you can have that, know when different ramps are gonna close, usually 9 to 5 or 6 in the morning. And then I also wanted to mention, we've got a lot of great things on the agenda today. So we've got some of the more fun things that you do as a board, which is grant money. You're gonna hear from 3 of our major road sponsors who are gonna tell you about projects that are requesting major road funds from our sales tax. We also have an allocation, a substantial allocation to marine transit. We had a pretty busy agenda. Nancy Whelan is here for questions. Thank you, Nancy. But she'll be doing a presentation in September on the status of their activity. We had some other things we needed to do today. We're gonna be awarding contracts to a firm and an individual on our 580-101 direct connector. So when we passed the sales tax measure in November, we immediately put that money to work. If you'll remember, in December, we allocated funds to crossing guards, so we avoided crossing guard cuts. We also started working on several of our big projects associated with the measure and in the expenditure plan. One was Sonoma Narrows. You granted funds back in December to continue the design and activity on that project. And then we also began the process of hiring an engineering firm, a professional firm, to start on our 580-101 connector. So this is our big new connector from northbound 101 to eastbound 580. And you'll be hearing about that project today. And we'll be making a recommendation for that firm to start work. You're gonna have in your supplemental packet, and we'll talk about this later in the agenda, a list of potential kind of, we'll call them dream projects associated with a measure that could be pursued in the Bay Area called FASTER. And then finally, we want to talk a little bit about Caltrans, and we want to talk a little bit about a state legislative item that is intriguing and unique. And so we have a lot coming up, and I'll look forward to getting into the meat of the agenda. Madam Chair, if I may, I'll go ahead and administer the oath to Mr. Beckman. So, sir, good afternoon. I, Diane Steinhauser of the Transportation Authority of Marin, do hereby certify that Eli Beckman was appointed as an alternate member of the TAM Technical Advisory Committee at the Board of Commissioners meeting on Monday, July 8th, 2019. Please repeat after me. I, Eli Beckman,
I, Eli Beckman,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely
That I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or
Without-
purpose of evasion.
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge
That I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Right.
All right, and that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner matters that are not on the agenda that anyone would like to bring up. Oh, you do?
I
Okay.
went to the county fair. I took the shuttle and it was paid for with Measure A dollars.
Yep.
Anyway, great. It was a great fair.
Okay.
I rode my e-bike, and we rode a county bicycle coalition, kindly valet parked it for free.
Great. And I hear the 8:30 train, the 10:30 train from the fair was a huge hit too, so we're getting there, slowly but surely. All right, any other commissioner reports? Okay, now I'm gonna go to Commissioner matters. Now I'm gonna go to Commissioner reports, the MTC report. Commissioner
Nothing
Collins.
really to report today. We're still having ongoing discussions regarding the Housing Alliance of the Bay Area, piece of legislation. That committee is due to meet this week. Senator Mike McGuire is the chair. David Chu, the author of the bill, is reaching out. He would be very interested in, I think, meeting with kind of a Marin County delegation. If there's an interest in that, I thought a starting point maybe could be our Housing Legislation Committee members, so Judy, Alice, and Joan, and others, if that makes sense as well. So I'd be happy to put that together, depending on how things play out this week.
Okay, let us know.
Okay,
Glad to.
great.
Okay. And while you're there, Marin Transit
Yeah,
business.
so that's a more fun report along the lines of what we were talking about, and that is the free local transit during the county fair, which was very successful as a promotion. And this was not just buses related to the fair, but countywide on Marin Transit during that time period. So from what we can tell, riders appreciated the free and increased service. It attracted people who had never used Marin Transit services. And anecdotally, we understand there was an increase in ridership during the same time last year, perhaps not surprisingly. Ridership data from the promotion is still being collected and analyzed, and we'll know more about the results in the coming weeks.
Great, good, thank you. Smart, Commissioner Phillips.
Thanks. We have not met, Smart Board has not met since our last meeting, so nothing new to report other than perhaps comment as everyone have thus far on the fair and the success of the train. During that period, I talked to Farah today and he was most pleased with the ridership, so
Great.
that seemed to work out well.
Good, thank you. All right, this is open time for public expression, and this is for issues that are not on the agenda. Anyone from the public? Okay. Consent calendar. There are some actions on this. Does the board have any questions on the consent? If not,
I'll move consent.
Second?
anyone from the public want to comment on consent? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, now we get into the happy part of the,
Well, we actually have item 7, Madam Chair, which is our state legislative action.
oh, yeah, okay. Who is someone here?
Actually, I'm going to invite Lynn Chan up, and we're going to be presenting this to you. And I'll kick it off.
Yeah,
SB 277 is legislation sponsored by our Santa Clara Valley Senator Jim Bell. The legislation is proposing to revise the distribution percentage between the formulaic and competitive programs under the local partnership program. The local partnership program came about through Senate Bill 1, and it's about $200 million annually, and right now there's a 50-50 share. 50% goes out by a certain formula. 50% is left up to the California Transportation Commission to decide what to do with the money. The legislation was sponsored by Bell and promoted by the larger counties who started down the path of wanting 95% of the money to be distributed by formula. There's always been a disagreement between Northern and Southern California as to what the formula should be, and we can talk a little bit about that. But the smaller counties viewed the CTC's discretion as more advantageous and initially resisted any huge change between the formulaic and the competitive split. To that extent, there was meetings held with all 24 of the self-help counties around the state, and phone conversations and emails and phone polling and voting, and we eventually landed on a feasible 85-15 split, with 15% reserved for the competitive program to be used by the California Transportation Commission for counties under 750,000 in population, which would include us. This is still being debated and discussed. Many of the smaller counties are still against this. Your staff recommendation is to go ahead and accept the 85-15 recommendation, but perhaps phase it in over time so the CTC has a few years that they can still have a good amount of funding that they can release generally. And probably the big difference is that we are at a small share of these formulas, which is enough to fund a big project problem. And it's more likely that the CTC would look favorably on us as a small county on the edge of an urban area with big congestion problems and maybe grant us 10 million or 20 million out of the competitive share, which they do for small counties, versus us trying to accumulate 500,000 a year for a very long time to solve anything. So we have a long recommendation that we are putting on the table. We think a nice compromise would be to phase this in so the CTC retains a good share of the money for a few more years. But we'd love to hear your thoughts and your thinking on this. So, Dave,
Yeah, sure.
anything else you want to jump in on?
Yeah, I just want to give you an idea of what we have received in the past and where we put that money. On page 10, there's a table that shows all the money that we have gotten under the formula share and where that money has gone. We get about from our I just want to give you an idea of what we have received in the past and where we put that money. On page 10, there's a table that shows all the money that we have gotten under the formula share and where that money has gone. We get about almost 400,000 from our Measure A, and we also get a minimum share of 100,000 under our Measure B, so roughly about $490 a year, and the CTC have allocated 3 years worth of money so far. I also want to point out under the recommendation, in addition to what Diane said, the phase-in over a 5% to get up to 85% would take about 7 years, so it's a gradual increase. But even within the formula program, we're asking the CTC to use a different formula to calculate the fund share, because if the CTC used only population to determine the formula share, then Southern California would be at an advantage because they have a larger population. So we're asking the CTC to factor in not just population, but also the amount of revenue that Northern California generate. And that's advantageous to us because of the toll revenue that we generate, which is substantial. So that's one of the nuances of this request. And then lastly, we've asked the TCC to maintain the 100,000 for any qualifying tax or fee. Again,
As a minimum.
as a minimum, I don't know what that Measure B would be reduced to, but we estimate that if we don't get the minimum, that Measure B amount would be reduced. And the guess, I don't quite sure know. But the minimum would allow us to at least get 100,000 in Measure B. So it's a multi-phase recommendation with a lot of nuances.
So, if they don't accept our recommendations, are we gonna vote yes or are we gonna vote no?
Well, this caused a very arduous split in the Self-Help County Coalition. All the large counties kind of muscled in a 95-5 and approved that as their recommendation to Bell. Fascinatingly, Santa Clara did not sponsor this legislation based on the split. They sponsored it based on the formula because they have a small population but they generate a huge amount of revenue, obviously, in Santa Clara Valley with Silicon Valley. And they wanted to have this more revenue base. So this whole split kind of came in as an afterthought to the original sponsorship of the bill by Bell. So there's counties testifying today. Since we haven't taken this item up, we're not testifying in the Senate to kind of move this along. We also don't know what the governor's office is going to do. He appoints a good number of the CTC commissioners. He may want to influence what they decide to spend the money on. The CTC commissioners are not happy because this is a CTC policy and procedure that they approved. And now someone-sponsored legislation forced them to do something they don't want to do. So we're kind of trying to get along with our neighbors.
So this'll be our recommendation?
Yeah.
Not, okay.
Yeah,
So the
but
vote-
but the governor's office is meeting to talk about this with several folks on Thursday, and they may veto it.
So
My
if-
thought would be to pause until Thursday and not show our cards either way, because it may die anyway.
Okay.
And why create enemies of the CTC if we don't need to?
And then we would take it up later if it looked like something that we could go along with,
Well,
right?
it's gonna move pretty quickly, it's gonna move out of the
So
Senate.
we're just not gonna make,
We could
make a
abstain,
stand.
or, which is another option, or we could say.
Well, the
it
recommendation was that we
85-15.
support the amendment.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's.
Is that still the
That's the staff, yeah, that's the staff
Okay, let me
recommendation,
go to-
but
okay.
it's a little
Question.
murky.
Okay. Questions?
Any thoughts?
Yes.
So if this were to go through, theoretically, the formulaic share would maybe go up from 500,000 to 800,000. Or
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
typically are we allocating those dollars as TAM? I'm trying to, because it's somewhat new, but we've had 3 big projects.
Yeah.
Is it just on a project basis, a call for projects?
Those money actually come to us by formula share to TAM and to each CMA that has qualifying taxes. But as you can see, 2 of the 3 years we have made that money available to our partner agencies. So it wasn't done on a call for project basis because the money is directly allocated to the CMA that has those qualifying tax and fees.
But so if this goes forward and it's going to be 800,000 a year from now until whenever, should this board at some point figure out, how we're going to manage those funds
process.
moving forward, so it's not just a year-to-year
We can
approach?
give you process options. We'll often fold it in with other call for projects and try and multiply the funds with other fund sources. So we can come back to you with some options on how to manage a process.
Yeah, and that might be, or if
Yeah.
we decide to allocate those funds to a larger project over number of years, might be a good discussion to have at some point.
We don't seem to run short of, oh my God, I have to have money in the next 3 months or this project will die. So we often put those on the table as our highest priorities. and we hear about them from your staff, so.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Commissioner Phillips.
I'm struck by your comment with regard to the status, which is a little murky, as you suggested, at this point in time. And furthermore, if we take action on this map, it may be for naught if it's not it's rejected by the governor. So I'm wondering, between the chair and our executive director, if we could advise you to act in accordance with the discussion and contingent upon the outcome of the governor's office, and authorize you to, go forward from that point, rather than making a hard decision now.
That would be fine.
I think that's good.
I want to be a good team to the other counties in the Bay Area, but in all honesty, we are probably better off with the status quo. Because we need big dollars that we're not going to get otherwise. And so I think we kind of do kind of a wait and see, at least for the next week.
Okay, okay. Any other commissioner comments or questions about this? All right, let me go to the public. Any comments, questions? All right, so I'm going to ask Commissioner Phillips if he would like to make a
Sure,
motion.
thanks.
And I think that's right.
I would move that we authorize the chair and the executive director to transmit the board's preference based on our discussion, if it's deemed appropriate, by, is Thursday a good date to use or not?
Thursday or Friday, yeah.
By
Yeah.
Thursday.
Okay,
Second.
all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Good luck reporting on that one. Okay, we're going to number 8 on the agenda. And this is to award a contract for preliminary engineering, outreach, environmental studies and approval, and various Caltrans approval reports for the northbound Highway 101 to eastbound I-80 direct connector, and give the project to Kimley Horn. We've waited a long time for this. Dan, are you gonna tee this off?
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, great.
All yours, buddy.
Thank you. As everyone knows, this was an exciting part of our recent sales tax renewal, and we're very excited about it. As part of the sales tax renewal, we were able to get some money right away, so we can get going while we wait for RM3 to get all worked out. So this is the direct connector between northbound 101 to eastbound I-580 approaching the Richmond Bridge. As part of this, we're also, at least for the early on design work, we're going to be looking at both directions, mostly to make sure that the other direction works in conjunction with the northbound to eastbound movement. So that would be the westbound to southbound movement will also be part of this. As part of that process.
This for Francis Drake, correct? Both.
No, this is a direct connector.
This is just direct
From
connector,
highway to
okay.
highway.
And we don't know where that's gonna take
Okay,
place yet.
okay.
That's all part of the process.
Right.
We did do some early on work, and we identified, and we reported the board showing a couple of options, one up on the hillside, one down by Bellum, and one halfway in between.
Mhm.
But those are still yet to come out of the complete process. So as part of this, we worked out our own kind of estimate of what this is gonna cost, and we put out an RFQ, and we got 4 firms interested. The scope of the work was the outreach, the project initiation document, or the project study report, and an evaluation of all the alternatives with input from the public, and refining those alternatives through the environmental process, all the studies associated with that, and finally to get a project approval document from Caltrans called a project report, and as part of that, you have to look at all the exceptions you need from Caltrans standards. So all of that was part of this package. The actual schedule and scope is mind-boggling what's involved. The schedule goes on in all of the proposals for 20 pages. So it is quite a bit of work. We got 4 teams. If you look on your packet, those teams were ranked. And I'm sorry,
Page 14 of your packet.
Page 14, thank you, Diane, appreciate it. Right in the middle there were 4 teams ranked. The top team was Kimley Horn and Associates. Now, these are teams. If you look at the next section down there, also on page 14, you see all those other firms that are part of this team. This is, we found this team to be the most qualified team, and they had a good understanding of the project and their approach. The evaluation panel thought was the best. The evaluation panel consisted of 2 project managers from TAM, a senior branch chief from Caltrans, and the director of public works for San Rafael. And all of those people felt, I believe it was universal, that this was the top ranked firm. So in the meantime, after that, we've asked the Kimley Horn team for a cost proposal, which they sat down and did. That's quite extensive, where you have to get input from all of your subcontractors. And they came up originally with 6.3 million total, and that was a little higher than our original estimate, which was somewhere in the range of 4.5 to 5.5 million. But that wasn't to any of the detail that the Kimley Horn team did. So, and this is a cost plus fixed fee contract that does meet federal procurement guidelines. In essence, we get billed cost by everybody on that team. And the cost means the salary rates plus an audited multiplier that is based on their actual costs. And then on top of that, they get a fee that's fixed for the life of the contract. So their original estimate was 6.3, including a fee of $650,000. We did negotiate this recently with them, and the new agreed upon number, which we're recommending for award, is 5.9 million, and the fee reduction from 650 to 600,000. So basically, we're asking for you to award a cost plus fixed fee contract to Kimley Horn and Associates for 5.9 million not to exceed, with a fixed fee that is within that 5.9 million of 600,000. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just, we spent a lot of time looking at alternatives back when we put together Regional Measure 3. The lowest cost alternative, which ended up in Regional Measure 3, was this kind of lower speed connector at 135 million. This is about 4.5%, which is well in the range of what standard practice would be for a project of this size and complexity. So we feel good about what we've been able to negotiate with the team. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have a very strong team. We were very pleased with the response. There's a lot of projects going forward in the Bay Area. We're very glad we're going to get some dedicated resources from this team now. And we strongly encourage you to consider the approval, and so we can get going on this.
Also,
quickly.
one thing I might add, the project manager from Kimley Horn, Chadi Chosbeck, who is right behind me with his hand up, is going to be managing this project for the consultant team. And we were very impressed with his resume and experience.
Great. Okay, questions? Yes, Commissioner Phillips.
Thanks. I like the process. I'm quite familiar with our department head, Bill Guerin, and I'm pleased that he was involved and feel comfortable with it. I do have one question, and I think you touched on it, but I'm a little unclear reading the report. It's under fiscal consideration on page 15. In the middle of the page, it talks about cost plus fixed fee contract. Prime and all the consultants will only bill their direct and indirect costs with no markup or profit allowed. Then the last sentence, next to last sentence, you say, note the fixed fee can be considered a profit for the team members. So in one sense, you say there's no profit, and next you're defining the profit they're making. So I'm unclear what this profit's all about.
And that makes sense. The first part was about this is called a cost plus a fixed fee contract.
Right.
And it most likely should have been worded better, but the first statement was about the cost half of that.
Right.
And the fixed fee is about the fixed fee portion of it. You know, sort of the cost doesn't have any markup or profit, it's just the firm's costs. That's the way federal contracts are normally done, because there is an incentive for them to work quickly and efficiently, because by doing that, their actual profit is fixed. They don't need to bill more hours to get more profit. So on a federal contract, you fix the profit at the very beginning. So if they get the work done quicker, they still get all that profit, and they can move on to the next contract and get those people working on another contract. Without doing that, at least in the federal government eyes, people will tend to just keep working and working and working to get more and more profit for the firm and never get done. So that's kind of the thought process behind this. I'm not sure if it really works out that way, but that's the way you have to do it. That's the way you have to do it on a
So
federal.
I'm not sure how they're calculating the quote profit, because it now appears that they are, in fact, and I don't begrudge them, we're all in business, so I don't begrudge them that, but I don't know how it's calculated. And if, let's say that time, it probably won't, they're a quality firm, certainly, but if the time takes them twice as much as anticipated, are they gonna bill anything beyond the fixed fee?
No, well, there's two things here. There's the not to exceed amount, which is 5.9 million. Included in that is a fixed fee profit of $600,000. That will not change as long as the scope remains the same. Like if they put in, when they did their estimate, 20 meetings of this and so many hours to complete task B and C. If it takes them 100, it takes them twice as long to complete tasks B and C, and it takes 80 meetings. The fixed fee does not change. That's set for the life of the contract. The difference would be as if there was a scope difference, like we did something that we didn't put in the original RFP, like do the final plans or something, which wasn't part of this. Then we would renegotiate the fixed fee. Otherwise, that stays constant.
Thank you.
Yes, sure.
I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
That's pretty close.
Great answer.
Any other questions? All right, anyone from the public want to comment on this? All right, I'm going to bring it back to the board, and the action before us is to vote to award a preliminary contract for the engineering outreach of the northbound 101 to eastbound I-80. We're doing it.
So-
and that amount
Second.
should be for 5.9 million. We didn't have that in this packet.
Okay, 5.9 million, thank you. Do I have a motion? Oh, go. Okay, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And also now, the next part of this item is the award of a contract for project management services.
Right, well, as part of this is gonna take an awful lot of effort, a lot of outreach, a lot of management time. TAM management decided that it would behoove us to have a dedicated project manager for this. We estimate that person to work somewhere around 1/3 time per year, so somewhere in that neighborhood. So we did a process where we talked to several firms or individuals that knew Marin very well. We had another panel went through that process, also involved San Rafael, and we chose Connie Premier Enterprises, who's in the back here as well, with her hand up.
Connie.
And she, as you might remember, those of you that have been on the board a long time, helped us quite a bit with the gap closure project and did a very good job managing it in almost the same role. So we feel that she would be an excellent choice to lead this. And TAM's recommendation is to enter into a contract with her as well. This is a non-federal contract, because it's a smaller part of the work.
Got it.
So, that's our recommendation. Any questions on that?
Yes,
I-
Diane.
I do want to mention that Connie Vermeer is directly related to Andy Vermeer of the Bay Area Toll Authority. And after consultation with Connie, Andy, and our attorneys, we've worked out a non-disclosure arrangement regarding Connie's activity on the project that she will be entering into. And we also have received assurances based on the structure of the Bay Area Toll Authority and the dissemination of funding, that there will not be a direct relationship between Mr. Vermeer and activity on the project. So with that, we feel like we've successfully addressed any potential conflict of interest.
All right, let me turn to the audience. Is there anyone to comment on this or to ask Connie a question? Okay, any questions from the board on this position? Yes.
Just wanted to thank you. Diane, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate what you said. I just wanted to ask, $400,000 is a sizable contract, and this is a sizable project. Is there an estimate of sort of the annual outlay of funds, and over the time period? Is it through construction or through design and engineering?
We feel, like I said, this will be about 600 to 700 hours a year. And we expect that to go on through through at least the project approval process with Caltrans, and at that time we'll decide if we're going to bring this back in-house for the final design or continue with a project manager.
Okay, and the duration then you're expecting for this first piece of?
Well, the contract will go through the end of 2023. However, we hope the work is done earlier than that, but that's kind of a worst case. We can only contract for 5 years anyway at TAM with our own in-house policies. So that's all we can go almost anyway. So we're taking through the end of 2023, I believe, is what the recommendation was. And but we hope to be done with project approval by early 2023, if not quicker, if we can get everything done.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions? Yes.
Sorry about this, but that's
Yes.
Sorry about this, but that's $670 an hour. Is that the going rate?
No, it's 225 an hour.
Well, if you divide 400,000 by 600,
By 2,400 is for 4 years.
it's for, oh, I'm sorry, this is for 4 years.
Yeah.
I apologize.
It's 600 per year. And I don't think we even get quite the full 4 years out that we've chosen to use the number.
Any other questions from the board?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I just want to
Sure.
clarify my understanding.
Sure.
So we're saying this is 4 years at 1/3 of a year per year spent working
More or
on this?
less.
That was more or less? Okay, so that adds up to 1 1/3 of a year, $400,000.
Yes.
And we're saying that is the going rate?
Her rate is 225 an hour, which for a senior project manager is actually at the lower end of the normal range.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no more questions from the board, do I have a motion to award a contract for project management services?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, good job. Now we get to come to the fun part. Okay.
I'm just going to introduce Dave Chan, who's going to quickly go through very important action you take every year, an allocation of funds to Marine Transit.
So this is the allocation of sales tax funds to Marin Transit. Dave.
Dave Chan, Program Manager. This is an action to approve allocation request of $19.2 million for Marine Transit for fiscal year 1920. As you may recall, we normally take up this action in June, but because we were going through the development of the Measure AA strategic plan, and also with the uncertainty with the Measure A and Measure AA reserve policy that we went through last month, Marine Transit decided to wait until those issues were resolved before coming to you for this request. So now that these issues are resolved, they are requesting approval of both Measure A and Measure AA funds to take effective on July 1st. This allocation is made up of $6.4 million in Measure A and also $12.8 million of Measure AA for approximately $19.2 million. A summary of the request can be found on page 20 of your packet. And as you can see, we have under Measure A and Measure AA, $22 million in available funds. So there's sufficient money to cover this request. But as you can also see in the table, under category 4.2 and 4.3, there's a small deficit for each of those categories. So they're asking for a little bit more money than they have. But we're not concerned with this because of two factors. One is that our revenue estimate tends to be a little low anyway, so at the end of the year, next year, when we get our actual collection, there's usually more than enough to cover. And also the other factor is that Marine Transit frequently don't ask for all the money that's allocated, so what any unexpended drawdown this time next year should be more than sufficient to cover those deficits. So again, it's nominal deficit, we're not too concerned about it. So the detail again is on the table, highlights all the requests and all the available money under Measure A and Measure AA, and we're asking for your approval for this allocation request. And we have Nancy Whelan, General Manager of Marine Transit, available for question and answer, or I don't know if you want to say anything, but she's definitely available for question and answer.
Fine, sure, do.
Maybe I should wait until you take the action. I just wanted to thank you for considering this, and I look forward to coming back and giving a full report on how we're doing. I think the importance of this is that we are funded 39% by the sales tax revenue, and so it's a very important piece of our budget, of course. And this year, you may have noticed that we've asked for quite a bit of money on the capital side. That's because we're replacing 10 of our vehicles, 10 of our articulated vehicles with some hybrid vehicles, and so we have a pretty large capital expenditure this year. So more to come on all of that, but thank you again for considering this.
Thank you. All right, any questions from the commission? Anyone from the public want to comment or have a question? All right, so I need a motion to allocate. All right, so I need a motion to allocate $19,204.63 to Marine Transit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes, great. That's great. Okay, now, we're going to more allocations. We are looking at, we're on item 10, the allocate transportation sales tax funds to Novato for the Novato Boulevard segment 1 rehabilitation project.
Dave Chan again. I'm going to do this in kind of a three-pronged request. I'm going to talk a little bit about the overview information for each of the application, and then have each of the sponsor come up and present the project, and then I guess you guys can vote on it after that. But again, this is a three-pronged request from Novato, San Rafael, and the county, and it's shown in the packet as 10A, 10B, and 10C. As you may recall, in the Measure A program, there's a strategy to implement major road project with improvement, and the program was divided by 5 planning area: North, South, West, Central, and Ross Valley. And under each planning area, a list of project and priority were established, and each planning area was supposed to receive 1 project for funding. If they're lucky, they might get 2 projects for funding. Measure A obviously ended on March 31st of this year, and Measure AA took over. So under the Measure AA program, we decided to keep the major road program whole by transferring the unallocated amount of Measure A fund, which is 9.6 million, to the Measure AA strategic plan, and then simultaneously set aside 2.35 million for the major road program for approximately 14 years, and that would allow us to accomplish all the projects that were envisioned under Measure AA, at least the first or second priority project of each planning area. So that's why we're getting these requests now at this time, even though Measure A and Measure AA took over. But I do want to take a point out that these allocation requests will require a reimbursement schedule, because currently we have about 9.6 million. Next year, if all three sponsors come in and ask for their funds, we're not going to have enough money to reimburse them. So we have asked each of the sponsors to help us with a reimbursement schedule, basically over a 3-year period, when each fiscal year they can come in for the maximum amount of reimbursement, so that the cost of these allocation will be spread out over 3 years. And each of the sponsors has agreed, and each of the reimbursement schedule is noted in the memo of your packet. They're generally, for the Novato and San Rafael, is a 30% first year, 50% second year. I'm sorry, 20% first year, 50% second year, and 30% for the last year. And then for the county, it's a 20%, 40%, 40%. This allows, again, for us to have a predictable reimbursement request from each sponsor and allow us to fund them when they come in. And I also point out in the memo, if they don't ask for any of the money in the first year, then the next year they'll get the cumulative of the first 2 years. If they don't ask for it until the third year, then that third year they can ask for 100% of the fund. But this again allows us to fund this project all at once at this time. So with that, we have 3 requests before you. Novato is requesting $1 million to start the right-of-way and design phase of the Novato project. This quarter was divided into 3 segments. Segment 2 and 3 were completed years ago. So now Novato is coming in for $1 million to start again the right-of-way and design of Novato Boulevard. And we have Chris Blunt of Novato is going to talk a little bit about this project. And afterward, we'll bring up San Rafael and the county.
All right, hey everybody.
Welcome, Chris.
We'll wait for the presentation.
Okay.
Chris Blunt, I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Novato. Thank you for having us this afternoon. Like Dave said, we are requesting allocation of the TAM Major Roads funds in the amount of $1 million. That will allow us to move forward with right-of-way acquisitions and high-level design for the Novato Boulevard Segment 1 rehabilitation project, which is basically the last portion of the project, like Dave said. And this is really for the widening of Novato Boulevard between Diablo Avenue and Grant Avenue. Previously, the TAM board has allocated about $400,000 for segment 1. That's meant for the environmental documentation and the project development, initial project development work that's been done. The other 2 segments, like Dave said, have been done for quite some time. They were about $650,000 for segment 2 and $617,000 for segment 3. The city has budgeted $200,000 of development impact fees to match the TAM Measure A Major Roads funding request. So some background, this project's been going on for a very long time, and I'm going to try to give the entire history on one slide in about 3 seconds here. But basically, a countywide congestion management plan that was put together in the early 2000s determined that Novato Boulevard was falling below operational standards. The city embarked on a project study report in 2006 that proposed a 5-lane layout, and the EIR was initiated. The progress was slowed by the recession and limited staff resources. And then more recently, in 2017, the city hired a consultant team to complete the project, to deliver the project. Part of their task was to reevaluate the previous 5-lane alternative, the layout. And they came up with a 3-lane layout that met the purpose and need of the project, and our city council adopted that layout in 2000. So the previous segment, kind of have a cartoon of it here on the screen, had 2 continuous 3 lanes in each direction, a new connector street between Pine Avenue and Cypress Avenue. You can see that in the yellow down there, as well as a raised center median planter strip that was proposed in between the side streets. And it also included sidewalks, bicycle lanes, utility underground, and drainage improvements. We took a close look at this. We updated all the traffic counts. We looked at that Pine and Cypress Avenue connector and really significant right-of-way impacts that had, and determined that some of the proposals of this project were not particularly cost-effective, and came up with a new 3-lane layout that includes 1 lane in each direction between Diablo Avenue and Boulevard Terrace. If you're familiar with the area, that's the really narrow portion just north of Diablo Avenue. However, it opens up to 2 lanes northbound at Boulevard Terrace, which is before you get to 7th Avenue, Tamalpais. It includes a continuous center turn lane for access to driveways and side streets. And in the traffic analysis on the project, we found that taking that left turn movement, putting into the center turn lane, allowed the rest of the through traffic to continue, and operationally, this proposal worked from a traffic perspective. The center turn lane also allows folks coming from private driveways to make either a left or a right out of the driveway, as opposed to forcing them to go right in, right out. And the project includes sidewalks, bicycle lanes, drainage improvements, utility underground, etc. So this is just a zoom-in portion here. We are reconfiguring the intersection at South Nevada Boulevard and Diablo Avenue. We're removing the slip lanes and the free right turn lanes at those intersections. It's much more pedestrian friendly to do that. It shortens up the length of that intersection. We're also putting in modern traffic signals, and we're looking at interconnecting those signals through the corridor so that they are timed well and operate well. All of the turn movements were counted, and we've got storage here to accommodate those turning movements in each leg. It actually allowed us to remove some of the legs of the intersection, some of the lanes of the intersection. No turn restrictions at Cypress Avenue, Pine Avenue, or Los Alondras, and that was based on some public outreach that was very important to the residents, that they wanted to be able to get in and out of their side streets and go any direction. And here you can see where the 2 northbound through lanes start up. There's an office building development there. And from there, it's 2 lanes northbound through the project. So currently, the 2 lanes northbound do not start until Grant Avenue. So this adds a full, long city block and a half. And here we are at the north end. The project proposes to retain the existing asphalt pathway. We're looking at repurposing that as a true Class 1 multi-use facility, but we will continue to have the Class 2 bicycle lanes shown on the street. And so a real quick layout comparison. The previous layout looked like it was going to remove approximately 51 mature trees. The new 3-lane layout looks like it only needs to remove about 28. The wider footprint of the previous project looked like it was going to impact Nevada Creek. The new narrow footprint avoids those impacts. The right-of-way acquisition would have been very difficult, very challenging with the previous 5-lane layout. It looked like it needed to acquire land from about 27 different properties and remove or demolish at least 3 houses. Some estimates showed 7. The new project does not need to relocate or remove any homes, and it needs sliver takes on the frontage of about 7 properties. So much more palatable. And then the preliminary cost estimate for the previous 5-lane layout in escalated dollars, we're looking at 2022 construction dollars, 20 to 25 million, and with the 3-lane layout, we believe it'll be about 10 to 15 million. So much more cost effective. Completion schedule. I mentioned our city council approved the 3-lane project on June 12th, 2018. We are working on updating and wrapping up the EIR. We've also provided some interim improvements to the residents out there, knowing that this project has taken a very long time to deliver. We are asking this request for the allocation for the detailed design work and property acquisition. We expect that to take about 2 years, anticipating that the right-of-way acquisition is probably the critical path there. And then construction, starting in the spring or early 2022 through 2023. I think 18, 24 months for construction of the project. And that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, happy to jump in.
Any questions, anything you'd like to add, Commissioner?
No, other than the 3-lane option was, I believe, a unanimous approval by the city council when it came forward, and there's been a lot of excitement about this in Nevada, so we're excited to get this project going.
Great. Any questions from the commission?
I know
Anyone from the public want to speak? Thank you so much for coming out and doing this, and anything staff
next.
wants to, the next one.
Yeah. Next, we have San Rafael's asking for $1 million to start the preliminary and environmental phase of the 3rd Street rehab project. We have Lon Vinny from the Public Works Department, and I'm going to swing up.
Did you introduce her, Dave?
I'm sorry?
Did you introduce her?
Oh, this is Lon Vinny.
Hi.
With
Hello.
San
Public
Rafael's
Works.
Public Works.
Thank you. Welcome. Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Go.
So I'm here today to present the 3rd Street Rehabilitation Project in San Rafael. Just a little background, the Measure A expenditure plan was established back in 2004, and that provided funding for major road and infrastructure projects all through Marin. San Rafael received money in 2009 for the West End Revitalization Project, and in 2016, between Measure A and the State Local Partnership Program, we have $12.5 million for the 3rd Street Rehabilitation Project. 3rd Street is a major arterial between US 101 and West Marin. The project length is 1.3 miles. There are 14 signalized intersections. It's an important part of safe routes to school, and it's surrounded by a number of different land uses, including residential, commercial, and downtown. The project limits are from Miracle Mile to the west over to Grand Avenue to the east. We have a number of other things going on 3rd Street, particularly towards the east end. So we have 2 cycles of the Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP funding for safety improvements to intersections from Lindaro to Grand. We have the IDEA grant, which is the innovative deployment of enhanced arterials, and that provides detection and signal performance measures at the signalized intersections along 3rd. MMWD needs to get in and do a pipeline replacement project. And then we have a number of private developments along 3rd Street, as well as a potential relocation of the transit center that would touch 3rd Street. Because of all the different things going on 3rd Street, we'll do the environmental for the entire Miracle Mile to Grand, but we're gonna do the preliminary engineering for Miracle Mile to Lindaro. Because we have a bunch of funding for all the intersections in the roadway segment from Lindaro to Grand between the HSIP and the other grants I just mentioned. So during the feasibility study, we had 2 community outreach meetings where the public was able to come comment. We noted their concerns with different aspects of 3rd Street, what they liked, what they didn't like. What we heard was the folks wanted better access for bicyclists and pedestrians. They wanted to see some improvement to vehicular congestion towards 101, and then we have a different problem towards the west end of 3rd Street where vehicles are speeding up, so calming that end. Need for a tree canopy, enhancing accessibility in sidewalks, providing bicycle access from Miracle Mile to Miramar, simplifying the bike and pedestrian crossing at the 4th Street, 2nd Street intersection, maintaining parking in residential zones, and improving access to schools. This just goes over the available budget. So with the community wish list, including all those extra improvements, we're looking at a price tag of over 17 million. But with getting in the baseline improvements, including the necessary pavement repair and the curb ramp improvements and the signal infrastructure, and a number of other things listed, we have a project that meets the funding that we have. So the project goals and objectives are very similar to what the community wants, but as staff, one of our biggest goals is to develop an economically viable project. So that's meeting the needs of the community while also meeting the needs of the community, but meeting our budget as well. So just general corridor-wide improvements include bulb outs at key locations, traffic signal upgrades for larger signal heads, high visibility crosswalks, conduits for future signal interconnect, street trees, the upgraded curb ramps, pavement rehabilitation, and making sure we include those key safe routes to school routes. So our next step, we're here today to get your approval on the environmental and design funds for $1 million. We have an RFP out right now for the environmental work and design, and that's expected to take 18 months to 2 years. And we're looking at spring or summer 2021 to issue an RFP for construction. Thank you.
Any questions?
Just a quick question.
Yes.
With the conduits for future, are you allowing for spare conduits for other users? Or is that just for you signals?
I don't know the answer to that. I imagine we'll make them large enough to fit extra stuff in there.
Yeah, you could get back to Dave and let him know. That would be great. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Could I just because I'm not seeing it on the diagram, the 12-foot multi-use path between Miramar and Miracle Mile. So I'm trying to see Miramar. That's so that would be brand new.
So with some reallocation of space, narrowing the lanes, and in that area the lanes are pretty wide, we're able to carve out right now 8 to 10 feet of a path. There's some utilities in the way. To get it up to the 12-foot wide path, there might have to be a retaining wall built, and that's just not in the $12.5 million budget.
We're so in need of a good east-west route between the Ross Valley and San Rafael, so I'm glad to see this getting going.
Any other questions? Okay, anyone from the public want to comment on this? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, next.
Okay, last but not least, Marin County has completed all the pre-construction work on Sir Francis Strait in the Ross Valley, so they're now coming to you requesting $11.9 million of all the remaining Measure A money that's available, and we have Philip Buckley from Marin County to talk about this project.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Philip Buckley from Marin County, and I'm here to talk about the Sir Francis Drake Boulevard Corridor Rehabilitation Project. And we are requesting funds from Measure A for the construction of our corridor, as David said. Sir Francis Drake is our busiest street with 46,000 cars a day. At the peak location of the Alicio intersection of Sir Francis Drake. I'm just going to move somewhat quickly through these slides, but I'm going to go over an overview of the project, our goals and objectives, a little review of the history, our schedule, provide a couple examples of improvements that we're going to be doing on the corridor, and then we'll talk about the costs of the project. This is the project limits. The project goes from Highway 101 all the way to the town of Ross, and we're bordered there on the south side by a portion of Larkspur. So the total length is 2.2 miles. Project goals: repairing our asphalt, replacing it and rehabilitating it. We're closing a few gaps with sidewalks and curb ramps and improving pedestrian safety at all of our crossings for pedestrians. Updating traffic timing, improving traffic flow and reducing congestion. We're adding a third lane on Sir Francis Drake from El Portal to the Highway 101 eastbound. Improving transit access, improving bicycle access and safety. And MMWD has a pipeline project that has been incorporated into the project as a joint project, which they're funding separately. Our goal is to provide an economically viable project. This is kind of the history where we've come from, going back to 2013, and then our EIR scoping and certification in 17 and 18, and today we've completed the 75% plan specs and estimates. So this summer, our goal is to hire a construction management firm that'll be with us for the next 2.5 years. We're going to bid the project this fall and begin construction in the spring, and then construction will last for 2 years. This is an example of the work that we're doing at one of the intersections. The picture on the left is a before picture, and it shows slip lanes and pork chop islands where pedestrians cross a couple of times. The traffic signals are located in these pork chop islands, and so the after configuration has shorter distances for the pedestrians to cross, and all the signals are being redone, and we just hope that this will improve pedestrian safety, and the signal timing changes will improve traffic congestion. This is an example of a lighted crosswalk at the intersection of Ash, where there's been an accident history with serious accidents, and we also have a grant from TDA for $100,000 to install this talk traffic signal there, which will actually have which has a red light, and cars will come to a stop before proceeding there. This is another location near the College of Marin where there's a bus stop, and we work with Marin Transit and Golden Gate Transit to actually relocate a bus stop at the college. Right at Maples, the existing stop was east of Maple, and there was a lot of jaywalking there, and it was kind of a dangerous situation, so the bus stops moved to the west, and the crosswalk improvements and ramps and other amenities for pedestrians have been added to improve the safety there. This is another example of our rectangular rapid flashing beacon lighted crosswalk at the intersection of Tucson. And then on to the money. Just a summary. This is a summary of what these improvements are going to cost. $6.3 million in pavement rehab, $6 million in intersection reconfigurations, $3 million in traffic signals, $1 million in the signal interconnect and spare conduits, and then $1 million in miscellaneous concrete and curb ramps and that kind of thing, and then $500,000 in landscape improvements for a total cost for the corridor rehab portion of $17.9 million. And again, the corridor rehab cost of $17.9 million. In addition, we have some additional costs. The county is going to be contributing $800,000 from our streetlight fund to just improve lighting throughout the corridor. The project includes safety lighting at the intersections to light the crosswalks, but additionally, the counties, with our streetlight fund, we're going to be just providing better lighting along the whole length of the corridor for $800,000. The water district has a project at a little over $2 million, And then our construction management fee, we're estimating at over 2 million for a total project cost of close to 23 million at our 75% estimate. So just to kind of recap that summary again, 800,000 for the streetlights, 2 million for the water line. We're going to be asking MMWD to pay for their portion of the construction management fee, which is 200,000 funded by them, and then we have a grant for 100,000 for that Hawk traffic signal I showed you. And then today we're requesting 11.9 million from TAM, which was the total allocation that was available. And then it leaves us with a shortfall of $7.7 million. That's where the project's at right now. And so yeah, so the just to review what TAM has already provided for funding, we were previously provided $800,000 in the planning phase for planning and project outreach in 2013. We did an EIR and we were funded for $550,000 in 2016. And then we had a last funding amount for design was 1.2 million. That has gotten us up to where we are at today. And then through the end of our plans, 100% plan specs and estimates, which will be completed this fall. And so, yeah, and today we're requesting 11.9 million, and the total project allocation for the project from TAM is shown there is at 14.4 million. That's all I have
Great, thank you.
for you today. Yeah.
Do you, any questions? Yes, okay, Susan.
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning that one of your project goals and objectives is improving bike safety and access, but can you just briefly touch on what you're gonna do for that in the project?
Yeah, well, I didn't really show a whole lot there. We in the EIR, we identified a couple of project scoping elements, sidewalk widening that weren't funded, but that were environmentally approved, but were not funded with the project. And as you can see, there's a large funding shortfall. So I didn't bring a detail of these kind of the future things that we're proposing to do. But one of the things that we are doing now as part of this project is we're moving some of the median islands throughout the length of the corridor from, or at least from the highway to Bon Air to allow for some future work to be done that would enable for more of a multi-use path in the future on the north side of the road. For the time being, for what we're doing right now, there definitely is a lot of just general reconfigurations and timing of the traffic signals that's going to help the bikes get through the intersections more safely, and just realignment work. And there's work in front of Basage School where there's oh, that was my 10-minute timer on the slideshow. There's work in front of Basage School where we're moving sidewalks, where we have a lot of pedestrian traffic and cyclist kids commuting to school every day, where we're moving sidewalks and we're reconfiguring intersections at Manor, and we've added an at-grade crosswalk at Wolf Grade that's, so that kids don't have to take the bikes over the, there's a bridge over the road there now, and we've added a new pedestrian crossing there at Wolf Grade. So there's a lot of little pieces right now for the cyclists, but we haven't funded, the project isn't funded for the larger multi-use pathways at this point, because as you can see, we have a large funding gap.
Yes.
Yes.
Eli, is that your, are you through?
There's a list on page 62 of your packet that shows the project components that were included in the EIR that funding has yet to be secured. And it includes some of the multi-use paths that were referenced.
Okay, Eli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad that MMWD is doing concurrent work under this corridor. Do we know what the status of the sanitary infrastructure under there is, and has RVSD or whatever sanitary district that has been informed that this work is happening?
Yeah, we've met with them, and they're aware of it, and they've said that their facilities are all good. The other element that we still haven't completed all of our outreach that we need to, it would just be the private residences. There are some private residences that do have lateral connections directly into Sir Francis Drake.
Right.
And so there needs to be, we're still, that's one of the next things that I need to do, is to just go throughout the whole corridor and confirm all the direct connections, because Ross Valley themselves has said that they're good, but the private residences also need to be aware of the project and the moratorium on the street when we're done.
Great, thank you.
Yes, Dennis.
Thank you, Philip. I probably should be careful asking this, but what are the plans for the shortfall? Any ideas about how we're going to fund the shortfall?
Yeah, we have a lot of different ideas that we've been just talking. All of our directors in the Public Works Department today, we met and discussed about that. And I have Craig Tackaberry here today and Eric Miller from the Engineering Division. So one of the issues is that we have an estimate, and it's only at 75% right now. And so we feel pretty confident about our estimate, but we also really, we're at this point, we're in the stage of just collecting information and looking at what all of our options are in terms of the budget. And once we actually bid the project and have the numbers, that will probably be the time when we really seriously evaluate all those decisions. But some of the things we're talking about are just tightening our belt with the project and trimming scope items. Another thing, one item would be, you mentioned spare conduits. Another question. We have spare conduits in this project, and we have to ask ourselves, can we afford to add things for the future? We have signal interconnect now, but we're proposing for some future signal interconnect all the way through to Ross. So can we do those things? So scope trimming, and then we've also talked about, this project originally has higher priority, is from the 101 to Bon Air, and we're looking at, is there a way that we can maybe not go all the way to Ross and do as much as we can afford? Can we back off a portion of it and come back later and do it? And then we've also looking at the pavement is actually in fairly good condition out there, so one of the options is what can we do with the pavement instead of as a robust treatment? Ideally you do a project like this and you don't touch it for 20 years and everything's good, but is there a way to do all the really important improvements for pedestrians and traffic that we need to do, and then come back down the road and still handle some of the pavement rehab? So those are some of the ideas, and then we're just also talking about our priorities within our division and our paving budgets and looking at those, and obviously looking at other funding sources or whatever other funds are available for just all the various project elements. So we're still in the process of saying all the options are on the table, and we just need to evaluate them and look forward to getting our 90% and then our 100% plans and our bid estimates.
There could be, and I would encourage you to consider our Safe Pathway Call for Projects that we got out last week. We do have 12 jurisdictions. We have to try and spread that money to a variety of needs across all those jurisdictions. But we'd be glad to consider a candidate that could include a section in this corridor. So that is absolutely an option. Yeah.
Great. Yes.
Yeah, just a
Sure,
couple of
right.
comments. One, when the EIR was certified, it was already known then that the project scope was beyond the cost of the Measure A dollars available. But it was intentional to certify the entire project as we went after more money. So I would dovetail that comment with as you talk about scope and potentially phasing the project, one, that you, and I assume you are taking advantage of the Community Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee, which still exist, because I think that we're gonna want community input on if any tailoring that's done.
Yeah.
If anything is taken out of the ultimate project scope. And then I think the phasing piece is really important too, also to be discussing with that Community Advisory Committee. But I would personally hate to see, I would rather see something left in the scope and delayed to a later date than frankly limit it, because I think all the elements were important, from conduit to the multi-use path to whatever. And then on the, Susan, on Safe Routes is very involved in this project design. A lot of the intersection improvements very, very specifically designed around safety around kids in the schools that are in that area.
Yeah, and it just, through the chair, if I may, it just does seem both on the San Rafael project and this project that the multi-use paths are the parts that are not funded and are kind of being left into the future, yet through drawdown and everything, we know that our transportation is generating 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So, it just seems like those elements are kind of being left to the tail end. So I just kind of
And
note that with some
are those good
concern.
candidates for active transportation grants too? I mean, there's sort of a different element as well.
They could be. I mean, I think that both jurisdictions are very sophisticated about seeking outside grants, and I think we're going to continue to offer our services to you to apply for funds through those other grant programs. So we fund application processes for some of those grant programs. So we'll continue to work with you on that.
I think the fact that we have so much local money is attractive to the state when some of these other call comes out.
Right.
Is that they consider our money as leverage in a bigger project, so it's a good candidate.
Any more questions? Yes.
Actually, it's just a comment about all three projects as a whole. I think there's an opportunity for communication with this. We've been accumulating these funds for some time. I don't know if there's a way to kind of, as if they all start at the same time, to really communicate to the public, something a little more than just your tax dollars at work sign in front of each of the project, to communicate, all that's happening. There's more dollars going towards transportation. I think there's an opportunity for TAM to help all of the jurisdictions to really get the word out. This is $40–50 million of projects that are all going to be going on about the same time, affecting just about everybody in Marin. And I think it'd be a lost opportunity to not, remind and thank the public for providing the tax dollars to do these projects.
We couldn't agree more, and so we're going to start with your actions today and get the word out to our local partners in press on that, and then we'll continue to celebrate these project activities as they transpire.
Okay, I want to thank Novato, San Rafael, and the county for good presentation. And if there are no more questions or comments, anyone from the public, then I would like to ask for a motion to approve these three projects.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Go forth and build. Okay, we want, okay, speaking, it's 5 o'clock and the next item on our agenda is called Faster.
It's a good hint. All right, I'll be very brief.
Okay.
You have in the very last page of your supplemental packet a list of brainstormed possible visionary projects for us to consider if in fact the Bay Area pursues a revenue measure around transportation that's a partner to our Senate Bill 1 and our Regional Measure 3 toll efforts. There is a contingent of business organizations, Bay Area Council, Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and Transform, considering a possible measure that has been named Fast, Affordable, Sustainable Transportation. It is kind of patterned a bit after measures in Seattle and Los Angeles. You can read about that in the board packet on page 63, 64. We don't know exactly where this effort is going to go. A briefing of Bay Area transportation leaders scheduled for June 28th was postponed. So we're going to hear about this more the third week of July, and we'll be reporting back to you after that. We came up with a brainstorm list, getting input from our transit operators, Marin Transit, Golden Gate, and SMART, and looking at our own strategic vision plan. And you can see some of those projects on here. This is just mostly to let you know this is happening, and we may have an opportunity to suggest that some of these be included in Faster. It is centered around access in and out of Silicon Valley. I point out in the memo, rightly so, that for the North Bay counties to support some kind of a revenue increase like a sales tax, there's got to be something in there that we see helping to address our problems. I don't know if we vote for Dumbarton Rail Line, if that's the only thing that shows up on the list. So we came up with hey, what would we want in here as possible transformative projects to be included? You're just looking at the list now. There's no action, Madam Chair and members of the board, but these are some of the things being considered in Marin and the North Bay, and we wanted to bring this to your attention. And I'd be glad to take any suggestions now or in the future and answer any questions.
Yeah, it's a fun thing. Yes, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so I read it and I thought it was interesting. It's something I've been struggling with as a board member. I see that the models were 20 and 40 years, and I saw the concept of transformative projects. And you know, I would just sort of encourage you and your team, not necessarily to focus on projects, but is there a transformative philosophy? You know, I got the list, you know, right before I sat here, and I was sort of curious about the list, like, what is animating this list? Like, when I think 20 to 40 years for transportation, we have a future of transportation innovation, and I was sort of thinking, we should be thinking about projects, or where are we trying to take it in the future? I mean, if we're trying to get people, if the focus is getting people in and out of Silicon Valley, I'm always wondering, why? Right? Like why are people working from home? Right? Like, why are we sort of stuck in this old mode of moving people back and forth to do digital jobs? So I know it's very early on, but I would sort of encourage, what is the philosophical foundation by which TAM really wants to bring innovation and perhaps have Marin, you know, really be a leader in whatever this sort of looks like, before you go to the taxpayers asking for more money, instead of, you know, potentially a wish list of stuff.
Very good.
Great comment. We don't have principles spelled out. We know the group is considering faster, better transit as an alternative to driving that solves a number of problems with equity considerations in terms of those who have, you know, most need to use transit. I think in the future we can bring back some principles for you to consider and also reflect what the larger team of the Bay Area is considering. So we'll keep that in mind.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
So, yes.
if I may,
Please, yes.
just sort of a little counter to what Brian was talking about is there's that vision and the future and principles, but there's also, we're not going to stop moving people from Fairfax to San Rafael. And that east-west corridor, and I probably am, you know, stepping right in it right now because I'm not quite sure the status of the east-west corridor, even in conversation at this point. But we do still have to people move, regardless of autonomy and regardless of everything that we do from home and in our locales, we are missing great opportunities to get us east to west and west to east. And so I think that could be big, and I think it might fit somewhere, somehow in this list of potential future projects that require big money.
Any other, yes?
Thanks for both the points. I think both of you are back right. And I do think that there's a time frame from which we can expand our horizon beyond just transporting people by bike or bus or whatever. So I think both those points are valid. Down in the weeds a little bit, I listed some things before I got this list, and most of the items I listed were on the list, but I might include a couple of others just for what it's worth. One, double tracking SMART, because we're going to be significantly limited in our ability to transport from Cloverdale to Larkspur on a single track. Not going to happen. So just so you're perhaps aware of that. And then I think that self-driving autos is really the thing that's going to create a lot of capacity in our existing highways. Not adding lanes, but rather, you'd be bumper to bumper on self-driving. So I think that somehow we ought to start thinking about that in this time frame, back to Brian's point. Most of my others were included, so thanks for providing the list.
Just as a follow-up to Gary and Brian, coming back a step from what Brian was suggesting, I do think we need to look at, and throughout the Bay Area, including us, east-west, high-speed rail connections, where people can afford to live, to where they work. And I think that that idea was talked about a few times at MTC many years ago, but it kind of was dropped at some point from Tracy and places like that, in Silicon Valley, to bring people to where they want to work in a quick time, rather than trying to invest in highways and things like that. So I just think you're right. The bigger vision needs to be looked at, ideas that benefit the whole Bay Area, in which we could get the Solano connection, east-west, with that same package.
Okay, Director Fredericks.
And I just wanted to make a comment, which, depending on what your time frame is, may be more practical. And that is bringing SMART to the Larkspur Ferry. One of the concepts of that in the past was acquiring right-of-way around Wood Island, so there'd be a turnaround.
Well, if we're talking big ideas,
Yeah.
I'm all about the big ideas. I'm still massively entrenched with the Hoven Ring in Eindhoven, and so I really would love 40 years from now, if not 4 months from now, a floating roundabout at the hub, linking West Marin with this really awesome town of San Rafael. So.
But I have to comment, if you look at a 5-year time frame, mine is an awesome idea too.
Alice, all your ideas by definition are awesome. You have my support.
Wait, let me call on Director Luke and then you next.
So just a couple that I would throw in that. And I know this is probably more capital intensive, but going back to changing philosophies, changing ideas, the idea of free fares on transit. So when you look at the budgets for SMART and Marin Transit, the amount of fare revenue is not that much. So you could do something really transformative, say free fare on any public transit. The other one doesn't really, I guess, move people faster, but maybe moves people more efficiently in a greener method. Would be electrifying our entire fleet of buses and maybe even our rail cars at some future date. Not say electrification, but battery as an option.
Okay, Director Hilmer.
The momentum of my comment fizzled because I couldn't follow Alice.
Did you want her to say it
Only to
again?
cite that at the time of the planning for the SMART route, we were working very closely with the owners, the private property owners between the platform and the ferry. And upon mention of the idea to the property owners, all consultants were summarily fired. Just to give you an idea of the will.
Send me in, Director Phillips.
Just to add to your point with regard to getting from the SMART station in Larkspur to the ferry, we have talked talked about that, thought about it, some it's $100 million, so. Come up with 100 and we'll do it.
It's an awesome idea.
It's an awesome idea.
Of course, there's rail east and west along Highway 37.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
I think autonomous golf cart shuttles on the connector would be one.
There you go.
It's a defined
No one
route.
has mentioned SkyTran down Sir Francis Drake.
I mean,
I'm
might
really
be able to
sad.
Come on,
That was the best idea we've ever had.
Shall we go
Nice
back?
maglev. Okay, did you get that, Diane?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay, well, this was a great way to end this because everyone had great ideas. It just shows we should have a little part of our agenda being just whatever you brainstorming, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
very useful.
Is that good? Is that all you need? All right, so,
One more item.
yeah, Caltrans, right?
I'm gonna do a quick introduction on this so we can, proceed. We are still working to deliver a widening of the northbound 101 off-ramp to Bellem Boulevard, which will relieve traffic congestion on 101 over Cal Park Hill in the afternoon, and improve access to the Richmond-Santa Fe Bridge. We've had a sudden change in cost, and we want to press Caltrans to contribute more funds to this project. So Dan, you wanna talk a
Well,
little
that was
bit more?
pretty much it.
Yeah. Sorry, Dan.
The sample letter is on page 69, if you'd like to see it. Basically, I can give you the history on this, but I think you've all heard it many times, so why don't we just open it for questions?
Does anyone have any questions about this item, about a letter to Caltrans to ask for some more funding so that we can do this Bellem Boulevard safety project? Okay, no questions, no comments. Anyone from the public? Let me bring it back. Do I have a motion to approve the letter? Second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it?
I don't know.
There's the Caltrans report, but.
Yeah, we do have a Caltrans report. We received a very favorable response from the new director that he will come to a future meeting, and we're hoping to have him come in September.
Great.
Tony Tavares, and talk to you more about Caltrans activity.
Great, so. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. I hope to see you all July 25th
Yes.
at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll let you know where.